They didn't even notice I wore the designer dress I saved for months. Standing at the edge of the room, I caught glimpses of my family's polite smiles, fleeting glances, and distracted conversations. My mother murmured something about the hors d'oeuvres, barely looking at me, while my father clinked glasses with my uncle, nodding at stories I wasn't part of. My siblings laughed at jokes I didn't understand, and for a moment, I wondered if I had simply become invisible. Every smile they gave felt like a spotlight on my inadequacy rather than a celebration of me. The flowers I had picked, the music I had chosen, the small touches I hoped would make the day special all seemed to dissolve into the background of their indifference. Even my closest cousin, who had promised to stand by me, barely acknowledged my rival. I smiled through the hurt, forcing polite laughter as guests complimented the cake and the venue. Inside, my chest tightened, the humiliation gnawing quietly, a persistent echo that whispered, "No one really cares." As the ceremony began, the preacher's voice filled the air, but it was muffled beneath the pounding of my own heart, echoing with every slight, every dismissive look, every moment I had been overlooked. The day was supposed to be mine, but somehow it already belonged to everyone else. From as early as I can remember, it felt like I was living in someone else's shadow. My parents cheered louder for my sister's piano recital, praised my brother's first job promotion as if the world had ended for him, and somehow, I was always just. Their birthday parties blurred together, mine were small, almost an afterthought, while theirs were extravagant, filled with friends and attention I never received. I tried so hard to shine. Straight A's, volunteering for every school event, helping around the house without being asked, but it never mattered. The smiles I saw were never directed at me, the compliments never genuine. Even in adulthood, the pattern continued. My accomplishments were minimized, my choices questioned, and my opinions dismissed. When I spoke about promotions or awards, nods and polite murmurs replaced excitement. My parents' focus remained elsewhere. I remember the sting of seeing them beam at my siblings' successes, the unspoken message clear: I existed, but only as background. No matter what I did, I was invisible. That feeling settled into my bones, shaping the way I view myself and the world around me. The day after my wedding, my phone buzzed constantly with messages I didn't want to read. Family group chats were alive with commentary, not compliments, not gratitude, but comparisons. It was nice, but nothing like Emma's garden wedding, one cousin typed. Another chimed in, pretty simple, don't you think? I expected more. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, disbelief and shame knotting together. How could the day I had dreamed about, planned for months, be reduced to a passing remark, a casual judgment? At brunch, my aunt leaned over and whispered, I guess it was charming. For what it was, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting me to understand the subtle dismissal. I nodded, forcing a smile, my stomach sinking with every syllable. Internally, I screamed, is this really all I am to them? Just someone to compare and dismiss? Even the few who tried to be kind hesitated, their compliments lukewarm, hesitant, as if saying too much would betray allegiance to someone else. That day, I realized the wedding hadn't just gone unnoticed, it had confirmed every unspoken truth I'd felt my whole life. I had been overlooked, minimized, and quietly erased again, and the hurt was sharper than any insult spoken aloud. A week later, the news hit me like a lightning bolt. I had inherited a $5.5 million luxury home from an uncle I barely knew. At first, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced in disbelief, a whirlwind of questions and what-ifs. How could this be real? I paced the apartment, staring at the ceiling, my fingers trembling as I tried to process the absurdity. Excitement collided with guilt. Was it selfish to feel joy when my family had barely noticed me, barely cared? Yet beneath it all, a spark ignited, a thought I couldn't ignore. Would I tell them or let them remain oblivious? The possibilities swirled, a dizzying mix of anticipation and caution. I imagined their faces, the way they had overlooked me on my wedding day, now confronted with wealth and status they had ignored for so long. Suddenly, the invisible girl had power, a tool to command attention without pleading, without groveling. My heart beat faster with both fear and exhilaration. The scales were tipping, and for the first time, I felt the thrill of choice, of control, of quiet, impending vindication. I couldn't resist testing the waters. At first, it was small, almost imperceptible, slipping a photo of the new house onto my social media. A casual mention in conversation, a fleeting story about the view from the balcony. Each time, I watched carefully, noting the glances, the pauses, the faint uptick in curiosity. At dinner, I mentioned how the kitchen reminded me of a resort I once visited, and my cousin nodded politely, barely registering it. "That sounds nice," she murmured, dismissing it as if I had said nothing at all. Even my parents barely reacted, absorbed in their own chatter, their indifference palpable. And yet, beneath their casual disregard, I could sense the flicker of awareness, tiny sparks of recognition I had planted without them realizing. It was intoxicating, the knowledge that I held a secret they didn't yet understand, that soon, their casual dismissal would crumble. Every hint, every test, built tension like a coil tightening, preparing for the day I would finally reveal the full scope of what they had overlooked, what they had underestimated, and what they would soon envy. Suddenly, I became the person everyone wanted to impress. Invitations arrived out of nowhere. Brunches, weekend trips, casual coffee meetups, all carefully timed to include me. My phone buzzed constantly with messages I hadn't received before, all polite, all eager, all dripping with curiosity about the house. My siblings called more frequently, asking casual questions about design choices, landscaping, the view, as if trying to gauge how much I had really gained. My parents, who had once barely glanced at my wedding album, now lingered over every photo I shared, complimenting details they had previously ignored. Their obsession was subtle at first, polite and measured, but it grew with each passing day. I watched their reactions carefully, noting the envy and FOMO that bubbled beneath their smiles. The same people who had dismissed me, overlooked me, and minimized my accomplishments were now scrambling for my attention, eager to align themselves with my success. The contrast was intoxicating. Then I was invisible. Now I was the center of their world, and every interaction became a test of power, patience, and control. I couldn't help but replay old memories as I watched them fumble now. I remembered my high school graduation, sitting alone in the corner while my siblings basked in applause and praise, their smiles brighter than any mine had ever received. I remembered birthdays with gifts that felt like afterthoughts, dinners where my achievements were brushed aside, and family gatherings where my presence barely registered. Now, watching them try to match my new status, the contrast was staggering. My cousin bought a flashy car, hoping to draw attention at a weekend brunch, only to have it pale next to the sweeping terraces and marble floors of my house. My brother attempted to host a lavish dinner party, dropping hints about his new investments, but I caught myself smiling quietly at his forced enthusiasm. Their efforts, desperate and obvious, highlighted years of my neglect and invisibility, and for the first time, I felt a sharp, quiet satisfaction. I didn't need to gloat. Their failed attempts and frantic one-upmanship spoke louder than any words. I decided it was time. A small family gathering, nothing extravagant, just enough to bring them under my roof and witness their reactions firsthand. As they arrived, their eyes widened at the front gates, the perfectly manicured lawns, the sweeping glass doors. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's polite smile faltered. "Wow, this is incredible," my cousin stammered, her voice betraying disbelief. I smiled inwardly, savoring the moment. "Remember when you didn't even notice my wedding dress?" I thought. Their casual indifference of the past clashed sharply with their current awe, and it was intoxicating. Over hors d'oeuvres, they asked questions, fumbled over compliments, and tried to mask envy with politeness. "I can't believe you've done all this yourself," my sister murmured, eyes darting to every corner of the living room. I nodded, letting silence do the work my words never could. Each awkward pause, every hesitant comment, was a testament to years of oversight. Each flicker of guilt a quiet victory. The subtle karmic satisfaction of seeing them squirm, realizing their previous neglect had finally caught up, filled me with a warm, steady thrill. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was respected, envied, and in control. The scales had shifted, and I finally understood the power of being overlooked no longer. It was just my father and me alone in the study, the rest of the family lingering in the living room, blissfully unaware. I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and calculating, trying to assess whether I had changed or if this wealth had softened me. "I suppose this house came as a surprise," he said, his tone dripping with thinly veiled judgment. I didn't flinch. I met his gaze evenly, letting the silence stretch before speaking. It did, and it made me realize something I've known for years. "You never saw me." "Not really." His mouth opened, then closed, searching for a retort that didn't exist. Well, we've always supported you," he muttered weakly. I shook my head, calm but firm. "Supported me? You ignored my achievements, minimized my milestones, dismissed me at every turn. And yet, somehow, I'm supposed to feel grateful for that." The arrogance in his eyes faltered, cracks appearing as he stumbled over explanations, half apologies, and excuses. I leaned back, letting the quiet assertion hang in the air. For the first time, the person who had overshadowed me, who had dismissed me my entire life, was uncomfortable, unsure, and stripped of the authority they had wielded. It was a subtle, emotional victory, quiet but devastating. My power no longer invisible, my presence finally undeniable. Over the next few weeks, their tactics became more obvious. My siblings invited me to events, showered me with compliments, and tried to subtly imply they were now indispensable to my life. My cousin asked me to host a dinner, hinting that it would be so much easier if you had me helping. I smiled politely, nodding while inwardly thinking, "You only want access now that it benefits you." I began to hold firm boundaries, declining invitations with measured excuses, letting them sense the limits of my patience. At brunch, my brother spoke endlessly about his new investments, attempting to impress, while I casually mentioned a recent renovation idea for the house. Watching his expression tighten as he realized my influence outshone his efforts. Every compliment I received, I returned with calm acknowledgement, never giving more than necessary, quietly forcing them to work for attention they once took for granted. With each interaction, I felt a rising thrill. The subtle social reversals, the micro power plays, the realization that I could command respect without needing to raise my voice. For the first time, their charm and manipulation faltered, revealing the self-interest I had endured for years. Just when I thought they had grasped the full scope of my success, the next revelation hit like a thunderclap. I casually mentioned, almost in passing, that another property, this one a prime penthouse downtown, was now mine, part of an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. Their polite masks slipped instantly, eyes widened, jaws dropped, and murmurs of disbelief filled the room. "Wait, you're serious?" my sister whispered, her tone a mix of envy and panic. I nodded, letting the weight of the words settle. Internally, I savored the moment, the culmination of years of being dismissed, overlooked, and minimized. It wasn't just the money or the properties, it was the social power, the undeniable proof that I had quietly ascended while they scrambled for relevance. My cousin tried to joke, to mask the envy, but I could see it in the twitch of her smile, the way she avoided my gaze. Each reaction, each failed attempt to downplay my achievements, fueled a quiet satisfaction. Karma had arrived fully, visibly, and for the first time, I witnessed the pure astonishment of those who once thought I'd never amount to anything. By the time the next family gathering rolled around, the rules had completely reversed. Invitations arrived not for my approval, but to ensure I attended every event carefully timed to include me. My parents complimented my taste openly. My siblings praised my judgment on everything from decor to dinner menus, and my cousins hovered nearby, hoping for a scrap of attention. I smiled, gracious but measured, letting their desperation hang in the air. I must say, the centerpiece you chose last time was impressive, my mother said, her eyes flicking nervously around the room. I nodded, letting her words linger without overreaction. Inside, I chuckled quietly, thinking, years of ignoring me. And now you're all tripping over yourselves. The subtle humor of it warned me the poetic justice of a family once indifferent, now attentive, eager to impress. Every compliment, every polite deference, reinforced the balance of power I had patiently cultivated. I didn't need to gloat. Their reactions did it for me. In the quiet satisfaction of control, I felt an empowerment that years of neglect had never allowed. A perfect mixture of dignity and vindication. Sitting alone in the quiet of the study, I let myself reflect on everything that had led to this moment. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and minimized had shaped me. But they had also taught me patience, resilience, and strategy. I realized that my growth wasn't just about wealth or status, it was about understanding my own worth, asserting boundaries, and recognizing when to act. Watching my family scramble, trying to align themselves with me, I felt a calm satisfaction, not gloating, but validation I had long craved. Their respect was no longer demanded. It was earned through my consistency, my poise, and my refusal to accept their indifference. I thought about those watching, anyone who had felt invisible or undervalued, and I hoped they could see the power of patience, self-respect, and subtle assertion. Life had shifted the dynamics, and in that shift, I had finally found the empowerment I deserved. The hurt of the past remained a reminder, but it no longer controlled me. The house was filled with laughter and conversation, but the air felt different now, lighter, respectful, and attentive without being suffocating. My family no longer dismissed me, yet I noticed the subtle deference, the careful consideration in their words and gestures. I engaged warmly, but on my terms, savoring the independence I had fought so hard to maintain. Their admiration and envy no longer dictated my self-worth. I had claimed it long before they acknowledged it. Watching them interact, I felt a mix of satisfaction and realism. Relationships had shifted, but the past could not be erased entirely. Respect had been earned, not freely given, and that truth lingered like a quiet triumph. As I stepped back to observe, a soft smile tugged at my lips. I was finally seen, valued, and empowered, yet I remained firmly in control, a reminder that true vindication is not loud or boastful, it is steady, measured, and entirely your own.